What we see Miller do through his essay, then, is honor an irreconcilable opposition at the heart of Woolf's novel, which can be summed up with the actions of rising and falling, the lark, the plunge, life, right? Life is the continuity of the past with the present, continuity between people, with the fact that death, according to the novel anyway, is the only true place of communion and continuity. Unlike Benjamin and Narramore's articles from 2 weeks ago, Miller's reading attempts to show all the ways in which this opposition resists unification and harmonization. And this is really what he's articulating in the final paragraph of the chapter. For Anna Benjamin, you will recall, Clarissa Dalloway is awakened or reborn on this day in June 1923. For Narramore, she experiences a provisional liberation, a vicarious freedom that she cannot wholly embrace. While these sound a little bit like what Miller is saying, he plays with this division to a far more extreme and even frustrating extent. Parker on page 89 talks about deconstruction as presuming that there is really multiple meanings at the heart of a book, right? But this doesn't really help distinguish it from new criticism, which also sees multiple meanings at work in a poem or in a novel, right? It would probably be more precise to say that there is a resistance to meaning within any text, at least from the perspective of deconstruction. Not just multiple meanings, but an active resistance to the unification or harmonization of meaning. Parker does touch on this idea later in the chapter when he brings up Derrida's concept of différance. This is on page 96. I read this in class, but I'm not sure it actually helps much. Maybe I'll read it anyway. Derrida, this is on the bottom of 96, coins the term différance, which combines the French words for defer, meaning postpone, and difference. So différer in French, right, is a verb meaning both to differ and to defer, right? And so Derrida sort of combines these two ideas of difference and deference into this one concept of différance. Why? Okay. Différance, Parker says at the end of the paragraph, is Derrida's name for the continuous gap between the signifier and the signified, the gap that keeps meanings from ever settling into something stable, the gap that keeps all meanings unstable. More colloquially, we might say that différance is the gunk in the gears, the imperfection, the entropy or inefficiency that inevitably interferes with any system, right? And so any system that attempts to stabilize the meaning of something, right? The meaning of something as being in itself unique and thus different from everything else, right? That's the difference part of différance. Nevertheless, every attempt to force that security, every attempt will fail because at the heart of that system will be all these inefficiencies, all this gunk, as it were, what Derrida will call traces. Traces that actually defer the possibility, push off into some undeterminable future, right? Defer the possibility of ever securing that difference as a stable, coherent unit of meaning. Right? If this sounds weird, I'm going to try to elucidate that a little bit. Okay. In a late interview, and this is the handout I passed out the other day, I'll be putting this on Sakai later today. In a late interview, Derrida offered what is perhaps his most succinct definition of différance. Okay. So Derrida says, a différance, the necessary reference to the other, the impossibility for a presence to gather itself in a self-identity or in a substantiality. What does that mean? The necessary reference to the other. Again, I'll get to this. I'll try to elucidate this a little bit. It is crucial that if we do not understand the details of Derrida's philosophy, and how could we, since we're not reading him this semester, that we understand this, that he does not deny that meanings circulate. He does not deny that we have intentions. What he denies are that meanings, identities, intentions, names, words, ideas, concepts, that these things, these units of meaning, are never secure in and of themselves, never fully present unto themselves, that there will always be some reference to otherness or alterity within it, right? Tracks leading elsewhere. Derrida's word for this idea is différance, and his notion that each sign or each unit of significance has threads or tracks leading elsewhere, connecting potentially to other meanings outside the purview of an intention, is trace. Even the securest signification or intention, insofar as it is a text and ruled by the logic of textuality, has traces, cracks, or gunk, right, that destabilize the security of that unit or that system. A deconstructivist wants to find or generate or follow these tracks. They want to find what else a text might do if we refuse to honor the codes and conventions on which we usually lean in order to make sense of the object we are approaching. Deconstructive criticism, at least in a few of its iterations, certainly in the Miller book chapter, is less about showing that a text has multiple meanings, and more about offering a very close account of how the text, on its own terms, appears to undo itself. How it holds multiple readings or significations in a relationship of irreconcilable relatedness. How it has roads to elsewhere which the author may have never intended. No single message can be the meaning of a text, for it is the nature of textuality itself to play, and to betray not only the principle of unity or cohesion, the bedrock of new criticism, but indeed any system of codes or conventions that one believes to structure our perception of meaning. Thus, deconstruction is post-structuralist. If we think of new criticism and structuralism as efforts to standardize literary criticism, or for locating the source of meaning, right? Is it inside or outside the text? Is it in the form of the text or in larger structures of meaning? Derrida's key insight is that there is no standard, no origin of meaning, except the provisional and momentary meanings generated by becoming wrapped up in the web of a text, which is sort of to say, in the web of a web, right? Indeed, the very idea of origin is precisely what bothers Derrida. Origin stories, so popular in comics, action films, television dramas, creation myths, biographies, and histories of national and cultural import, are traditionally meant to bolster the integrity, the presence, the fullness, the self-certainty of a character or a situation or a culture, which is marked out as particularly significant or important. But other concerns with origins rule our lives. The origin of the cosmos, the origin of human life, whether as a species or as individuals, the origin of language, the origin of a crime, the origin of a psychopathology, the origin of some other illness, the origin of a trauma, the origin of a rift in interpersonal relationships, the origin of our technologies, etc. The concern with origins, sources, signatures, and other signs of ownership, intention, genius, responsibility, culpability, or certainty proliferates throughout our daily lives, as well as those of our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and so on. All the way back to our, and by our I'm marking myself as a Western subject, our earliest written records in ancient Greek philosophy. New criticism and structuralism are just two new episodes in the history of thought of the West. Locating origins, this time of literary meaning, within some sort of secure space. The poem's form, our readerly codes and conventions. Derrida's entire oeuvre is dedicated to infiltrating secure spaces of meaning and locating the spots of insecurity and instability that betray our belief in origins. So a new critic might say, if you want to find the meaning of a work of literature, look in the text. And a deconstructivist would say, fine, but where are the boundaries of the text? If I only look in the text, all I have are signifiers in free play. I need not honor the figurativeness of figurative language. I need not honor the literalness of descriptive statements. I can read philosophy as literature, and vice versa. I can read Mrs. Dalloway as a theoretical or philosophical text. I can read its language as a meta-language. I can read it as a treatise on literature. Structuralists might say, if you want to find meaning, attend to the codes and conventions that I should bring to bear on a text. And a deconstructivist would answer, why? Are they in any way universal? What's the center of the system that contains these codes? What guarantees its logic or suitability to the text to which I bring it? Although these rhetorical questions may appear to be saying, anything goes, right, in our interpretations, keep in mind Parker's words on page 95, that deconstructivists still pay close attention to the words themselves, to the text itself, and thus are composing arguments about how they think the text works, how it might work, and how it might contribute to larger concepts and ideas. Okay? And so this isn't a matter of anything goes. So on the one hand, they do betray the codes and conventions that even the novel itself might be sort of prompting us to use in order to make sense of it. But they also honor the potentiality of the book in some sense. Okay. But even so, what's the point of deconstructive criticism? Right. Why bother demonstrating that it is impossible to locate a standard of meaning in a text? Why bother showing that the tensions within a text are actually irreconcilable? A few answers will probably suggest themselves as we move through our readings in the coming weeks, but the last few pages I assigned from Parker 2 weeks ago do suggest that deconstruction has implications not only for the meaning of literary texts, but also for the attitudes and biases and prejudices at the heart of our cultural lives, and at the heart of who we think we are as individuals, as groups of individuals, as a nation, as a culture, as a species, and so on. Okay, so that will become important as we move through other units in this class. All right, so in the next video, this one I'm going to try to keep short. In the next video, I'm going to go back to Miller and walk through part of this handout and try to give you something of an inventory of the ways in which these ideas of Derrida translate into what critics are actually doing with literature in their interpretations and in their readings. Okay? So in other words, I won't be looking at simply what Miller is arguing, but how he's arguing it, right? Turning his mechanism of analysis in some sense against him, okay, or on him, let's say. All right. Deconstruction.